You're listening to Almost Sisters, a podcast where two almost sisters discuss their weekly interests. It's the same thing they've been doing for years, but now they're in front of a microphone, and they're editing it, and posting it with an audience. This is going to be trickier than they thought.
So, Caitlin.
Yes, Emily.
So you and I both like to read as a hobby.
Yeah.
But it didn't always used to be that way.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. I think, like most students, we did not enjoy reading in middle school and most of the way through high school.
Yeah.
Mostly because we had to read books that were assigned to us that we had no interest in reading.
Yeah. I didn't read a single one of those books. I think I read The Giver in 5th grade, and that was it. So.
I think my favorite book that we read that I had to read for high school was Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe.
And your dog's named after a character.
Indeed. But that was probably the only one that I actually ended up liking, and that wasn't until senior year of high school. So it took a while.
Yeah.
But now that we can pick what books we like, we both like reading a lot.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I have 2 bookshelves. No, I have 3 bookshelves.
Yeah. I'm sitting in your apartment right now, and I'm going to count...
Oh, yeah, I do have one behind me, too. Okay.
I count 8.
Oh.
If you count shelves.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And I'm sure there's probably some tucked away in your bedroom somewhere.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah,
So there's some in drawers. There's a whole... Anyways, and I read all these books. Like, they're not just for... Well, the fancy ones on one shelf are for fanciness, but I still read those.
Yeah. But we both like reading, which is not something that you see very often. It's not a common hobby. Which I kind of thought, oh yeah, reading, not a big deal. Like everybody does that. But then you said, I don't know a lot of people that read. And so I started thinking, do I know people that read? And I can't really think of a whole lot of people.
No. The only people that I know that read regularly are you and my parents. And my mom's book club that we talked about the other week. So you know that they don't read all the time. But
I mean, maybe there are more people that we know that read, but it's just not talked about a lot. Like, people don't talk about books that much.
Yeah, that's true. I think that there's kind of, when we were kids, and I talked about this with some of my friends the other day about nerd culture and kind of how, like, that's finally starting to be, like, okay. And so, like, reading was kind of, like, I think reading was probably even worse than, like, being, like, a super, like, into comic books and things like that. If you're, like, reading a novel, people were like, what's wrong with you?
Oh, is that for an assignment?
Yeah, exactly. So I remember, being in college, and of course I had a ton of books to read because I was an English major, but at the same time I was still reading other books, and people were like, what are you writing a paper? What are you reading that book for? And I was like, for fun. And they're like, why? So, and it was funny because, like, even English majors, they didn't really like to read. I mean, if they did, it was usually for pretentious reasons, but I'm not going to go into that.
I read War and Peace last weekend.
Yeah, quick tangent. I had a classmate who came up to me and I was like, oh, how was your summer? She's like, good. I was in this extensive club with, that we read War and Peace or something like that. She was like, oh yeah, we read War and Peace together and we studied it and all this other stuff. And I was like, cool, like, I went swimming. And I read some, like, I don't know, like, whatever I read that summer. But, like, yeah, there's a lot of just kind of like, oh, yes, I did this. And it's kind of like a tick off of, like, oh, I did this book, and now I'm a better English major. So, yeah, I mean, for, like, fun, I don't really ever see that. Yeah. So.
Which is weird, because it's so fun.
It is so fun. Like, you're going into a different world. It's like, I don't know. It's just, it's something that every book I read, even if it's just a fun story, I take something meaningful away from it. And it's like, yeah, you can watch a bunch of, like, fun stories, like, on TV and, playing video games and things like that, but I never really take away from anything. Like, I never, like, play a video game and go, I'm a better person for this. It's like, no, I just wasted 40 hours of my life. So,
well, I think that also books are unique in how they are like art. So art and music, when you start talking about how art and music can evoke emotion, people are like, oh yeah, totally, I get that. Because every now and then you'll come across a piece of art or a piece of music that just hits you.
Yeah.
And you just you feel it in your core, even if it's not like made for you. For some reason, it touches you on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And I think there are certain books that if you find the right one, they can do that for you. And like I can think of them off the top of my head. I'm just like, oh yes, these For You Select books. They get me. I love them. I will always have them in my collection. Like, and that's just such a weird thing that somebody can make something that isn't even intended for you specifically, but it can get you so deep that you're just like, oh man, this book gets me, man.
Yeah, and you like have this kind of like almost this feeling of like friendship or like kinship with this book of like this is something like so my favorite book that I had to read for college was Fight Club. And I remember just being like, and of course, I was starting like, I think it was like my third year of college, and so I was kind of still in that kind of like, who am I? What's the world about? What am I even doing here? And so like when I read that book, I was just like, man, like going into these people's thoughts and everything, it's just like, it wasn't that I related to them, because that's super hardcore. Like I couldn't relate to them, but it was just kind of like it put the world into a different perspective that I was kind of like, oh, okay, so like this isn't just me. Like this is something that people experience all the time. So you feel less alone, I think, with like learning other people's perspectives and stuff.
I think it's also interesting that reading books can help you determine what you really like in things.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I remember we were reading Jane Eyre in college.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, Jane Eyre is a good book. I really like Jane Eyre, but I think because it has specific elements in it that I don't see in a lot of classic literature, it's probably there, but I never had to study it. But, and so going from reading through Jane Eyre and being like, yeah, this is another classic novel that I am reading and I see a lot of the same things, and then those few specific things pop out, and just it immediately turned how I thought about the book and to being like, I really like this book now because those few select things were in it. And so it's interesting how you can kind of see what you like based on what you see in books.
Yeah, that's actually really kind of funny because I read my senior year of high school. That was the only book I finished because it was kind of like, I was like, oh my gosh, here we go again. Here's another classic literature book. And I was like, oh, but this is different. Okay.
Yeah.
And so like I really got into it and I really liked Jane Eyre. And like, of course, and then that led me into my whole Jane Austen kick, and now I'm like a super Jane Austen fan because it kind of let me go, okay, like there's more to it than just what our English teachers taught us. So
as a side note, Charlotte Bronte wrote Jane Eyre.
No, I know.
Okay.
I know. Oh, yeah. I was
just making sure.
So I was kind of talking more of like that time period, women writers, classical literature, and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, cool. Later. We'll keep that in so people don't try to correct me. So I teach kids how to read now. And since I've started getting really into reading, I kind of forgot how painful reading used to be. Like sitting down, summer reading at the kitchen table, forced to read these books and just like feeling this visceral pain of just like, I can't do this right now.
Oh my gosh, you're taking me back,
man.
Man.
It was just like, so like I'm working with these students and I'm trying to get them encouraged to read, but at the same time I'm like, man, like I get it though. Like I felt that. And I think, and I think the thing is that I think everyone needs to kind of go through that process because it's like you're a kid, you want to go run around, you don't want to sit still. I think the problem becomes when adults don't try to go back to it. Because I think you and I both wanted to try again kind of thing. And that's why we're reading what we're doing now. And, I think, I don't know, it's just so crazy to me now, just being like, oh God, like reading was so hard. Like it was so, and so now I know these adults that are like, oh, I'm never going to read a book again. Once I graduated high school, it was done for me. And so I'm just like, I get it, but just, you're older now and it's not going to feel like you sit in front of the TV for 5 hours every night. Like it's not going to be that bad like when you're a kid.
Yeah, I know those people and I'm just like, I don't know, I would get so bored.
Yeah.
If that's all I did and like didn't have different avenues to go down, especially reading, because the reading world is so vast. It's just like There's always something new.
Yeah, exactly. Because you'll watch a TV show and then you watch another TV show, and there's so much stuff that's similar because they try to keep to the same sort of format, because it's like, you know, this is what I almost said readers, watchers, audience members are like used to. But with books, it's like it's a free-for-all. Like they have their writing style. You know, I was just reading a book where it was very interesting. It's called Into the Water. It's the same author who wrote Girl on a Train, but she had like a dozen characters, and some of them, when she followed them, were in third person, and some of them, when she followed them, were in first person, because it kind of just... It depended on how deep she needed to go with each of these characters. And so it was like just free for all. Like it was just like, at first I was like, what is happening right now? But then it's kind of like, oh, this works because I need to be more into these characters' lives, and these other characters, I don't really need to, other than how they interact with the story, don't need to really care about that. But with a TV show, it would just been like the same thing. Just like pop over this character, pop over that character, you know, just, it's not... You know, it's, yeah, it's not different, basically.
Yeah, you can do a lot more in books. I mean, they always say the book is better than the movie because you can always do more than you can with movies and TV shows and stuff like that. Okay, I want to try something. Okay. I want to see if we can remember our earliest experience with wanting to be readers. Because I assume, I could be wrong, but I always wanted to be a reader. I could just never get there until after high school. Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind for me is I was in 5th grade, and my dad had, it's the really old Lord of the Rings trilogy that I still have on my bookshelf, and the Fellowship of the Ring copy is super damaged because I love the Lord of the Rings movies and I wanted to get more into the world, but Tolkien's writing is so much more advanced than I was at 5th grade. I mean, maybe some 5th graders can read it, but most probably can't. Most adults can't read Tolkien. So instead of actually reading it, I would just keep it in my backpack. And I just wanted, so every now and then I'd open it up and I'd read a couple of lines. And I couldn't. I'd put it back in my backpack. And so that was kind of the first real memory of just I really want to read because I really want. And now I have a Lord of the Rings tattoo. I'm super into it, and I finally got to read it. But I just remember just being why can't I just get through this? And I remember sitting on my couch, I had the book in my hand, it was half open. I wasn't even following the story, and I was like, Dad, what does subtle mean? And it was just me just kind of discovering the book, and so now it's all tattered and worn, and it's a good memory. So my earliest memory of reading that I can remember. I think this was probably either 3rd or 4th grade. We had reading logs that we had to complete. And so it was you had a month and you had to fill out this entire chart of books that you had to read so that way you could get your reading time in or something like that. And there was a kid in our class who, at the time, we all called him the smart kid, the brainiac kid, the nerd kid. Face. No, but just he was the kid that was the smartest in the class. Later on, he would be the curve breaker, that kid. Okay. Yep. And I remember he completed his log in 2 days. We had a month to do it, and he did it in 2 days because he wanted to read a Harry Potter book, and a Harry Potter book wasn't on the allowed reading list, and so he was just I'm just gonna read and fill out this log so that way I can go back to reading Harry Potter. And just God. Well, but just watching him he was, I said, he was the smartest kid in class. He always finished his work early, and as soon as he finished, he would go back to reading. And so I was always just how much fun must that be for him to be just constantly trying to read that book. And so I remember early on being I want to be like that kid. I don't think I had the attention span to do that at the time. I remember trying to go to the library and trying to find a book that I wanted to read, and was very attracted to books that had bright colors. And so I picked out one book that was called, it was part of the Dollhouse series. I still remember it. But I picked out the second one, and so my friendly neighborhood librarian gave me the first one to read, and then I was able to go read the next one that was the colorful one.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might still have that book even. But yeah, I just
The
remember...
library book?
Well, no, I bought my own copy, Caitlin. Not a stealer, not a thief.
I just need to check, okay?
No, I have my own copy. But yeah, I just remember seeing that kid and thinking, like, he must be having so much fun. I want to do that.
Yeah, like that, like, okay, so earlier my oh my god was kind of like, how inspiring is that kind of like, yeah, that was like, oh my god, what an ass. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so it was, so at our private school, all the smart kids were into like science and math and things like that. So there really wasn't anyone at our school that, okay, except for one of our friends, who is the art teacher's daughter. She was really into reading, but it was much more like manga and things like that, and graphic novels, which are great. But like, as far as like novels went, there wasn't really, I don't think I really had anyone around to really kind of inspire me. Like, my only inspiration was, I watched a movie, I want to read the book now. Like, that's how I got into Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't until the 5th movie came out, I was like, I should probably read Harry Potter. Like, because I think there were some things in the movie that didn't quite make sense to me. And I was asking my friend about it, who had read all the books. And they were like, well, it explains it in the book. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I don't want to just read the 5th one. I don't want to like start in the middle mm-hmm. or whatever, the end. But so yeah, so I didn't really have any, other than movies, nothing really inspired me to read. So at that age.
Mm-hmm. I think for both of us, when we were able to, get away from assigned reading and start reading things that we actually wanted to, that kind of helped us get back into reading. Yeah. So now that we've gotten back into a habit of reading and a mm-hmm. hobby of reading, what kind of stuff do you like to read? Because we didn't go to the same school all through high school when we started developing our like of reading. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really know what kind of stuff you like to read. And I would imagine it's different from the stuff that I like to read. I think it's very hard to find somebody who has your exact same reading taste. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what do you like to read?
So obviously with the whole like Lord of the Rings thing earlier, I am into fantasy. That was stemmed partly from the Lord of the Rings, but then also partly from the kind of so I had like two crowds I hung around with at my new school after I left this one we went to together. And so there's the nerd group, and then there was the cool group. And so the nerd group was really into like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings and like fantasy stuff, Shakespeare, things like that. And so I got into, that's when I started reading Game of Thrones. And so fantasy is kind of like my go-to with reading, especially because I like big worlds that I could like, oh, what if this character was in there, things like that. But then at the same time, I think I like a lot of more, it's kind of a tricky genre, more mature YA, where it's like, younger people dealing with like real world stuff. And so I like kind of seeing kind of that, like the development of kind of like going from childhood to like being an adult. My writing is based off a lot of that stuff too. Recently I've been getting into mystery just because I've been trying to put mystery into my writing. And so I think a lot of my reading preferences are based off of what I write. But at the same time, I'm afraid to touch fantasy, so probably not as much. But also I'm really into like nonfiction books. Like I like history books, I like self-help books, autobiographies, things like that. So we could also do something too on top of this is, so this podcast I listen to, they do, what's it called? I just had it. They have what's called wheelhouses. And so it's like basically you just put a bunch of like words, and that's kind of like what your wheelhouse is. So mine would be like fantasy, dystopian future, coming of age, and multiple perspectives. Like that would kind of be my wheelhouse. So what do you think? Like, so first, what are your preferences too? And then like, what do you think about what your wheelhouse might be?
Interesting. So I also like to read kind of more mature YA stuff. I don't care as much for the Twilight age-wise stuff.
Yeah.
So I do like realistic fiction when it's not too super serious.
Yeah.
We read... I'm probably going to get people that don't agree with me on this, but we read Casual Vacancy when we were in a book club for a short time.
I don't agree with you, no.
I know you don't agree with me. I didn't like Casual Vacancy. It was too serious for me. Like, too real world. When I read, when I watch stuff, I want to escape from real world problems. Like, I'm not about that life. So
yeah. See, that I think that was the first time we really kind of discovered our preferences, because I think that's another thing in my wheelhouse is like real world, like gritty kind of. But the thing is that it's so hard to find without like murder being involved in that. So I think that's why I like the Casual Vacancy so much, is because like no one dies.
Yeah, but everybody is a jerk. Like, why? Characters like that drive me crazy when there's no like redeeming character. There was I'm not gonna get into it because we had a long discussion about Casual Vacancy. We're not gonna do it again.
Yeah,
But
okay.
So I like realistic fiction when it's not
drama.
I do like fantasy, but I haven't read a lot of high fantasy.
Oh yeah.
And so I am currently reading a Patrick Rothfuss book, which is high fantasy. And I really like it, but it's taking me a long time to get through it.
Yeah.
And so I think I can say that I like it, but I don't have as much experience to be able to say for sure. But I do like casual fantasy, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, I like when there is magic or time travel or something like that, kind of in a setting where it would be unexpected.
Yeah, because I think high fantasy is kind of like, if you like reading about history, you can get really into high fantasy. That's kind of how I found it, to be like, I've never met someone that was into high fantasy but didn't like history, and vice versa. So I think like you don't really like reading about history like in your spare time. I mean, I kind of would assume that or whatever, but yeah, I think that's kind of the difference. And so like, you know, what you're kind of talking about is kind of more, there's just so much in high fantasy. Like, I think it's just, I wouldn't be into it now if it wasn't like my determination to get through Lord of the Rings, I think.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, this Patrick Rothfuss book that I'm reading is interesting because, like, first of all, it's like 3 inches thick, so it's like hefty. And whenever I think to myself, oh, I need to go read this book, I'm always like, oh, I don't want to. I want to go read something else. But as soon as I pick it up, I can't put it down. And so it's like, I don't know why I get it in my head of like, oh, I don't feel like reading it right now, because every time I read it, I enjoy it. And so, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic, me and that book.
It's a love-hate relationship.
It is. No, but I love it. But that's the thing. I can put it down for months at a time and then pick it back up and remember exactly what happened beforehand. So, I mean, he writes it very well to where it's not confusing. So, but anyway, tangent about Patrick Rothfuss. But, I also like reading romance stories, but not like cheesy romance stories.
Not like unrealistic romance stories.
Right.
Yeah.
And not,
Yeah, I agree with you there. I like a good romance, but I think it's so hard to find. I think honestly my biggest issue with preferences is the fact that I still haven't really been able to find like specific things I want. Like with romance, it's kind of more like I want something that it's like, oh my gosh, that's so romantic, but then at the same time go like, oh, it could actually happen, and it's not just like, or it's, oh, this isn't abusive at all, and things like that.
Right.
So.
I mean, it's hard to find good romance, and so that's why it's like I hesitate to say I like it because I haven't found a whole lot that like meet the criteria. But I mean, there are a select few that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I love it so much. So if I can find it, then it's good.
Okay.
And so that's probably my constant quest, is to find good romance books that aren't like too cheesy and gross.
Yeah, just send your suggestions my way.
Okay. I will do that.
All right. So what do you think your wheelhouse might be?
I don't know. It's so random. So I would probably say, I don't know if lighthearted is the right word, because it doesn't have to be like sunshine and rainbows all the time.
But just kind of like, you know, it deals with real world stuff, but just like not to the point where it's like the stakes are super high.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think lighthearted. Yeah.
Likeable characters. I'm going to say that.
Okay, likeable characters.
Those people were jerks.
Let me be fair though, like that's very subjective because like I loved like half the characters in Casual Vacancy. Like
I don't even know what to say to you right now.
You know what? Maybe it's because like some of my friends in my last 2 years of high school were kind of like not the greatest people, so I'm kind of like, oh, I see where they're coming from.
Well, okay, maybe then I need a main character to latch onto because there wasn't really a main character in Casual Vacancy to like root for.
Yeah, yeah. There was like, and kind of like there wasn't really you couldn't really pinpoint a main character or even a couple of main characters. So yeah, that's true too. That would get kind of. I know that when I think the only reason I'm cool now with jumping from character to character and not really keeping up is because I read Game of Thrones and that's like every chapter you're like, who's this guy? Oh, okay, we just got to go with this guy now. And so if you're not used to that, I think that's really kind of like upsetting a little bit, like as far as just like, why is this happening? So.
I mean, it's not that I don't dislike multiple points of view because I have read books that have multiple points of view that I like, but there were characters that I liked, and so it was like I was happy to be in their head and like see what they were doing. So I'm following around a bunch of people that are backstabbing each other. I'm like, okay.
And again, I'm a Game of Thrones fan, so backstab away.
Yeah. I don't know what would be my wheelhouse. That's an interesting question because I would initially start putting in like themes that I like, but none of them would go together. So I'm not going to find a book that's got them all.
Okay.
So.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. So it's kind of like, I mean, for instance, like I like high fantasy, but like there's no like high fantasy dystopian future because like those cannot exist in the same world. And so it's just kind of like, what are kind of books that like you'd pick up and there's like some like keywords that you could describe as like, oh yeah, I'd give that book a try.
Honestly, I would probably give a lot of stuff a try.
Okay.
Like there's a couple booktubers that I like to watch, and I kind of had to stop watching them because every time that they recommended a book, I was like, okay, and I went and put it on my to-read list, and so my to-read list had 300 books on it, and I was like, this is unrealistic.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. It's really hard for me to pinpoint what strikes me about a book and what makes me want to read it.
I mean, I think that is kind of a great approach because I think I'm a little bit too picky with books. Like, I kind of get to the point where it's like, someone tells me to read this book, and I look at it, like, I have The Kite Runner on my shelf, and I know the basic synopsis about what it's about, but it's like nothing I've ever read before. So I look at it, and I'm like, I know it's a good book, but I guess I'm not there yet with my reading, and that's why, if we can talk about like goals now. So I'm still kind of struggling to get past that kind of like initial like, I don't know what this is, I don't want to read it yet, and so I'm kind of forcing myself through a ton of books, and so I can get through all the ones I'm comfortable with, and then I'm just left with ones that people have recommended to me. So last year I started doing a 52 book in 52 weeks challenge, and it didn't go quite as well as I expected, but at the same time I read 28 books last year, which is very significant compared to my like, you know, maybe a dozen at most for all the years before. And so this year I'm like gunning for it. Like I'm on track now. I'm like ahead of schedule now. And so I'm trying to like really plan it out very carefully, because I want to make sure that I can get to this point of like being able to read quick enough and consistently enough that I can get through more books. And then just kind of broaden my genre, because I've been like, okay, so I went to Half Price Books. It was my birthday, and I got a $50 Visa gift card. And so I went to Half Price Books.
Dangerous.
And like there's like this whole shelf pretty much. Not those books, but those books down there. Like I bought like 15 books. And most of them are YA, because I realized I'm a YA writer, but I haven't really read very many YA books.
That's probably why most of my critiques when I'm reading your book is like, this doesn't sound very YA to me.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's why I've been kind of my main preferences for books is like, does it relate to my writing? And if yes, I'm gonna try to read it. So but
that's a pretty broad category. You say you're picky, but that's pretty broad.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like, the thing is that there's other, like, for instance, The Kite Runner, and there's, like, I want to read Anna Karenina, and I want to read some Stephen King novels and everything else like that, but it's like, but those don't, I kind of, because it's like, I have other books to read, and I want to do those. So, but yeah, so I have Looking for Alaska, The Book Thief.
Wait a minute. You haven't read Looking for Alaska?
I haven't read I've read all his other books, but Looking for Alaska. Okay. So that's on my, I'm going to read it next. I'm reading Slaughterhouse 5 right now, and I'll read Looking for Alaska after that.
Those are two different books.
I know, that's the thing. So, like, I had someone comment on my Instagram, or, like, message me or something, and they're like, I don't understand, like, your book choices, because it went from, like, self-help books to the Adventure Zone graphic novel to a mystery murder book, and then to Slaughterhouse 5, and they're like, what are you doing? So, but anyways, so, yeah, so I'm doing the 52 books and 52 weeks challenge again this year, and even if I don't reach the 52, like, my goal basically is just to read more each year and just get better and better at it, because the thing is too is, but before I started this challenge, I was a really slow reader. It took me a month to get through one book, and not even a big book, and so that's another kind of goal for my reading. Do you have any reading goals, Emily?
I do. So it's interesting that we both have reading goals, but we didn't discuss putting together goals beforehand, but we both already have reading goals. So I used to be a much more avid reader in college. I guess I just had a little bit more free time, and so I was able to get through a lot more books. And I think I read maybe 2 books last year. Like, it was sad. And so, like, I think I have fallen out of habit of reading books, and so I'm trying to get back into my habit. And so the goal that I've set for myself this year is to just read 1 book a month, or just 12 books this month, or 12 books this year.
Gotcha.
Because I think I need to make time for reading, because I think, you know, starting a new job and having a dog to take care of and having a boyfriend, like, just having all these other things that I want to, or that I have to give time to, I don't think about when I have free time. Oh, let's go read. And so I just need to get back into that habit. I would also love to participate in Booktubeathon this year. I have attempted many years. Do you know what Booktubeathon is?
I don't know what Booktubeathon is.
Okay. So a booktuber is somebody on YouTube that talks about books.
Okay.
And there's, like, some main people that are kind of the heads of Booktube. Just
they are the leaders.
They are the leaders. They lead us all, yes. And they've put together a reading marathon that they do during the summer. And it's 7 books in a week. Or in 5? Wait, what is it? I think it's 7 books in a week. And there's usually challenges that go along with them, like, read a book that was recommended to you, read a book that's got red on the cover. They'll give you some kind of guidelines so you don't have a mountain of books that you have to pick from. And so they'll host Twitter sprints, and so they'll, you know, tweet out to everybody, like, read as fast as you can. Okay,
what
go.
are Twitter sprints?
I'm telling you what they are.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a different thing where they were tweeting. Okay, tweeting.
So on Twitter, they will go and, you know, you follow their Twitter page and you can get notifications. And so they'll tell everybody that's participating, okay, read as fast as you can for 30 minutes, go. And then at the end of it, they'll check back in. They'll be like, okay, stop. What did you read? What was your favorite line? Go get a snack. Like, stuff like that.
So stressful.
No, you don't have to do it. Okay. It's just like, it's to encourage you to get through your books that you're reading. And so it's like, if you're just sitting on the couch and you get a notification that says, go read sprint, it's like, oh, okay, I'll go read.
Okay, that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's kind of like using social media to be like, hey, you know, instead of like use social media to be lazy, use social media to not be lazy. I like that. Okay, I like it.
And so I've, like, tried to participate for many years, and I've never been able to complete it because stuff gets in the way. I think the very first year that I participated was as close as I got, and I think I got 4 out of the 7 books read. And then just every year after that, like, for some reason, whenever they schedule Booktubeathon, stuff happens, and I can never finish.
Well, this summer was my wedding, so that might have gotten in the way a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. So, yeah. So I would love to participate in Booktubeathon, even if I don't complete it, and I want to read at least 12 books this year.
Okay. Well, hey Emily, do you want an accountability buddy for Booktubeathon?
Accountability buddy?
An accountability buddy. That was a word we used at camp. Accountability buddy. It's accountability plus buddy. Accountability buddy.
I would love accountability buddy.
Cool.
Does that mean you want to also participate in Booktube?
That sounds like a cool thing. I'll participate. So
it's fun. Like, you don't have to participate in the challenges. I rarely do the sprints because I'm usually at work when they do them. Mm-hmm. But it's fun to be able to pick out books based on their challenges because you end up reading books you might not normally pick out as your next to read.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. Yeah, I probably won't do the sprints either because like I said last week, I deleted my Twitter. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds really cool. And we could be like, how many pages did you read today, Emily? I was like, okay, accountability buddy, I read this many. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm gonna get that part out. That was stupid.
I think it would also be fun. Not that we need more books because we don't. But Half Price Books does a warehouse sale every fall where books are $2 and under.
And Forrest is gonna be very upset that you told me that.
You and I need to go.
Yes.
Even if we don't get anything, which we probably will, but even if we don't, just like being there.
Just like
ah.
That's great harmony.
I'm glad we both have the same reaction to what that's going to be like.
Oh my gosh, that's too good. And then also I just got this subscription to this thing called Scribbler. And so it's like a writer's box. And so this month, the reason why I subscribed to it this month was because they're sending not one, but 2 books in the box. And so I was like, ooh, what a deal. And so I subscribed to it this month because I've been wanting to get it for a while because it has like writer tips and like some like, samples of like snacks and things like that. So I got that. And so I might be, if it's cool, I might be trying to put more books in my life that way because they put in books and you have no idea what they are. And so that might be a good way for me to like, now I have these books in my life, so now I got to read them and I don't even know. Because also another thing that I have a problem with, and it's kind of across the board of kind of with all the different mediums, but I'm like a slowpoke to everything. And so like, I don't really read anything new. I don't play any new games. I don't watch any new TV shows. Like, I'm always just, like, super late in the game with stuff. And so that's another thing that I want to try to incorporate more into my reading life is, like, new books. So I kind of know it's, like, out there and stuff. But
A quick thing. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this. But what do you do when you come across a book that you start reading and you don't like it? Because I started reading a book last year. And this kind of got me into a reading slump. It was by an author that I really like. And so I just like saw the cover. It was bright and colorful. And I saw the name and I was like, yes. And I snatched it and bought it. I got about 3 pages into it and I was just like, I hate this.
Oh, okay. So what was it that you hated about it? Because that kind of matters about.
It was like, okay. I love this writer, but it's like he writes 2 different genres. And so it's like, I really, really like one of them. Okay. And then the other one, I like kind of got into it, but then I finished it and I was like, that never really left the place that I didn't want it to be in. And so this book was in that genre that I didn't like, but it was like full force into it. I was just like, immediately, this is just like that other book, but 10 times worse.
Okay, well, I'll say that if you already knew, like, the genre and the author of that, if it was the same thing of something that you've read before, I would say, and it didn't grab you, I'd dump it. I usually try to, if I don't like a book, I usually try to give it, like, depending on the size, 50 to 100 pages. And then by that point, I'll decide whether or not to dump it. I think the only book I haven't... I'm trying to think about a book I haven't, like, finished because it was just, I didn't like it. I'm wondering, would I even still have it on my bookshelf? I don't think so.
So you say I'm less picky, but I think I dump more books than you do.
That's probably true. It might kind of be the same amount in the sense that you grab more books than I do, and I'm very picky about which ones I pick up. Yeah, I think honestly, like, I don't remember dumping any book recently. There's some books that I like put down and I go away from it for such a long time because I pick something else up, but it's never because I dislike the book. It's just because I got really excited about something else. So I have like this book about Cleopatra that I love, and I'm only halfway through it, and I've been reading it for like 2 years. I mean, honestly, like, I think it might also be, too, that I give it to 50 or 100 pages, and either it starts getting good, or I've invested enough time, or I'm curious about something. Like, there's always, like, a reason why I'm like, I might as well keep going at this point. But if you know, like, right off the bat, I don't like this book, because I think the thing is that you start to read it, but I shut it down before I even really get into it, because I don't want to waste my time, because I know that I'm going to invest at least 50 pages, and so I'm like, no, I will not pick you up, Kite Runner. I am afraid that I will put you down.
Well, I think I need to be in a better habit of reading, like, the first couple pages in the bookstore instead of just, like, being like, oh, I've heard of this book, or oh, I've heard of this author, or oh, I like this author, and just immediately picking it up without opening it. Yeah. Because I am very firm on no back covers, no inside flaps. But I do need to start reading it before I buy it, because I think I'll be able to pretty quickly tell if it's like the genre or the style of writing that I will be able to read. Yeah.
So that's another thing too, is that I'm a floor sitter in bookstores. So I will be looking at books, I'll be at a shelf, and I will sit down and I will open them up, and I'll spend about a good minute or two with the book. And if I'm not feeling it in that moment, back on the shelf. And so that's kind of how I just kind of scoot around the floor to each shelf and do that. But I think kind of maybe part of the reason why you have that kind of habit of like picking up a book going, oh, this looks really cool, is because that's kind of like how you got into reading with the Dollhouse books. So I think that's kind of like it works when you started out doing this stuff. And for me, it was kind of like very calculated, what would I be super excited about to read so I can actually stay motivated to read it. And so I think it kind of, I mean, I've never really thought about like preferences for books developing in that kind of way, but I mean, I guess that everything kind of develops in that sort of way, so maybe kind of childhood stuff.
That's interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
My parents are psychologists, so
hair flip, get on my level. So, Caitlin, which do you prefer? Ebooks or real books?
So it actually, it used to be I preferred real books over ebooks every time, but my past birthday, I got a Kindle Paperwhite, and so I kind of had a lot of issues with like the bright screen in my face, because like I'm very sensitive to light, especially like if I'm trying to go to bed, I couldn't fall asleep and stuff like that. So now I'm like, I'm kind of tied between the two, because I have Kindle Prime. Yeah, I have the Prime, but not the Unlimited. So I have the Prime, so I get a lot of free books on my Kindle. And that's typically the only time when I will use my ebook. But I also have a lot of books that I bought when I first started with the Kindle. So there's like a lot of old stuff on there that I might have either never finished, or I want to reread, or things like that. So it's kind of just, there's very specific reasons why I use ebooks, but then I don't know, you just can't beat flipping a page. Like, I think I'm always going to say real books to ebooks, but I also do love the convenience of being able to tuck an ebook away in my purse and not have to worry about the book getting ruined, because we have example of the Fellowship of the Ring of the book getting ruined for being in a backpack. So, what about you?
I agree, as far as like, I just like being able to hold a book. I feel more accomplished when I can see how far through the book I am, and it like keeps me going. It just makes me feel good. But I think I use my Kindle a lot to start reading samples of books. I said I'm trying to get better about like kind of testing a book before I buy it, because you can get like the first chapter of a book for free. And so I really like doing that, just being able to quickly read through the first chapter and see if I'm going to like it. And so that's really cool. I also agree that the Kindle is better for travel, because if I am like about to finish a book and am going to want to start a new one, if I'm going on a trip, I don't want to have to take 2 or 3 books with me. Just take the Kindle.
Yeah, I wish I had. So my Kindle was like I had to like take it into the shop right before I left for London. And so I had like a bunch of Jane Austen books on there, but instead I had to take my compilation Jane Austen book that weighs like 5 pounds, plus all the other books I needed to keep me occupied for 6 weeks. Didn't think that, you know, London has books that I could buy there. But like, so I packed like 8 books, and I think other than, I can't even remember which ones I took. I think I brought 2 home plus the Jane Austen one. I just left the other 6 at the thing. I was like, I left so much stuff there because I couldn't pack everything back up. So you're welcome, maids of the place that I was living in, because I'm sure y'all got those. But
here's an interesting question. Do you have a preference for online shopping for books or bookstore shopping for books?
Bookstore shopping for books. I like Forrest knows when we're about to walk by a bookstore to like hold on, because like I will just quickly dart into the bookstore. And so like he has to like grab my hand and be like, no, we came here for shoes. And I'm like, the books though. But I think I just kind of like one, I like the atmosphere. 2, I think it's just kind of, I get a better feel for the book, like, page size and kind of things like that. But at the same time, I think like there's not like a thrill in doing online shopping. Like
same. Like I feel so accomplished when I can like hunt down a book in a store.
Yeah.
Feels so good.
Like I just love, especially like half price books, because it's not as organized as Barnes and Noble.
My literature teacher once said in college, and it's one of my most favorite things she's ever said, half price book shelvers shelve with their heart.
That's so true.
They don't have any kind of system.
They're
they
like,
just use their heart.
Like, here, you could go sit with your buddy, and you go over here and sit with your buddy. Yeah, so that's basically, like, I'll go into, like, the writing section, and it's just chaos. And it's just, but it's great, because I'm just like, okay, well, here's a book about filmmaking, and 2 books down, here's one about writing prologues, or something like that. It's just a hodgepodge, and so it's just really great, because I think, like, with Amazon, and even with Barnes & Noble that's very organized, I can't stumble across anything.
Yes.
So I like being able to stumble across books. That's part of the thrill of the hunt.
Yeah.
Y'all missed my face on that, but I guess it was funny.
Oh my god. No, it's just how freaking nerdy we are.
Oh my gosh.
But I agree. Stumbling upon books is very, it's like part of the excitement, because especially, I mean, that's how I ended up with this Patrick Rothfuss book, because I had it on my to-read list, but I'd never, like, sought it out. But then I was in Half Price Books one day and, like, saw it on a shelf, and I was just like, yes, it is time. Coming home with me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's just the great, like, so again, Forrest doesn't let me go into a bookstore alone. He will not let me. It's not that he, like, okay, so the thing is, we have a very interesting relationship, because it's like, he will never tell me no, but, like, he looks, like, at me, and I'm just like, okay, I'm putting some back. But, like, I'll come up to him, and I'm just so happy. Like, I have a huge stack of books, and he's like, oh, God, okay, that's fine, whatever. Because I'm like, these were all on clearance. But it's just fun, just being able to kind of go up to the cash register, like, look at all these books I found that I didn't even know existed. And so, yeah, that's fun.
Half Price Books is a dangerous place.
It truly is, but a magical one at that. So, Emily, tell me about your weekly obsession.
So, my weekly obsession this week is late to the game. But I've been watching a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race.
Okay.
I'm kind of addicted to it.
Is that about cars, or is that about drag queens?
It's about drag queens.
Okay.
But it's like racing themed, so it's confusing.
Yeah, okay.
Like all of their branding is like racing stuff, so
interesting.
Yeah, but anyway.
It's the trick the NASCAR fans.
I don't think the NASCAR fans would stay very long. No, they wouldn't be church for very long.
Yeah.
But it's like Project Runway and America's Next Top Model, plus like, I don't know what else. all mushed together. And it's just great.
You love these like eccentric reality
Yes.
competition shows.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've been watching The Bachelor this season. Love it. Been watching Big Brother every summer. Love it. Survivor on top of it.
Right on.
Reality trash right here.
I had to watch Survivor for my economics class.
What do you mean had to watch Survivor? You mean you got to watch Survivor?
I had. Okay.
No.
Anyways, continue with your weekly obsession.
Okay. So I've been listening to WNYC's Nancy podcast, and they had an episode talking about it, and so I was just like, I'm gonna try to watch it because I've thought about watching it before, but never put in the effort. So I started watching it, and now I'm just like, got some free time. RuPaul's Drag Race, like I should be reading, but I'm not.
That's all right. So what about it? Like, I mean, you know, I know that it's kind of like right up your alley, but like, what about this specifically? Because I know there's a lot of like shows out there. What draws you to this instead of like all the other stuff?
I think right now it's just that I haven't seen it before, and so it's something new to watch instead of rewatching The Office for the 10 billionth time, or rewatching a show that I know I like. I think it's interesting because they, the way that the show operates is that they have a mini challenge and then a challenge and then they have a runway, and then somebody goes home every week. And if they're in the bottom two, they have to lip sync for their life. Because that's what drag queens do, apparently.
That's hilarious.
So, I always think it's interesting to see their runway looks because they make all their clothes. All of the challenges are very, like, creative based. It's all very, like, what can you create and how can you entertain? And so, I don't know. It's just interesting to see what they come up with and where their skills lie. Okay. Plus, it's got needless drama in it, so...
Of course, yeah.
It's entertaining to watch.
Kind of love that needless drama.
Yeah. So that's my weekly obsession. What is your weekly obsession?
So my weekly obsession is I've gotten back into I don't know what you'd call it, maybe like WriterTube because of BookTube, but it's basically like, self-published authors who have created this writing platform on YouTube. There's a couple who are traditionally published, but most of them are self-published because it's like, it's very, you got to market yourself and everything like that. So that's why they started doing the YouTube stuff. But more specifically, it's I've been following Kristen Martin. I've been following a lot of, like, the past couple of weeks, I've just been following a lot of people, like, how do they live their lives? And how can I be like this? But, like, she is the author of a series called Alpha Drive that is, that she published through Amazon, and she's, like, an international bestseller, but she's also a creative entrepreneur. So she has her own business, and she does, like, writing coaching and stuff like that. Basically, she does everything that I want to be doing. And so, like, I've just been, like, watching all of her videos. I was, like, on Instagram today, and, like, she was like, don't miss my webinar about building your business as a creative entrepreneur. I was like, oh my God. I was like, when is this happening? Because I, like, missed one of her webinars last week. I was like, oh dear. And so I, like, signed up, and I, like, it had, like, 6 minutes until, like, it was gonna, like, come on. And so I was like, oh, register real quick. And so, like, I was able to watch it today. And so it's like, so that's kind of been my obsession of just kind of, like it kind of was last week, of just kind of, like, how can I, like, be like you? But also just kind of, like, learn from what they've experienced and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my weekly obsession. Also watch the Shane Dawson's Jake Paul documentary series.
Oh man.
And so that was kind of last week and this week's obsession, because we kind of finished it at the beginning of this week.
You keep having two. They keep rolling over.
I know.
Cheater.
I need to, like, okay, today's Friday, need to have a new obsession. So, but yeah, so that was pretty intense, because I like, when we were recording last time, I only seen, like, a couple episodes, so it wasn't really an obsession yet, and so now it is. But
you just, like, knew it was gonna be.
I knew it was gonna be. Anyway, so I just want to honorable mention that one. And yeah. Hey, thanks for listening to Almost Sisters. I'm Kaylin.
And I'm Emily.
You can follow me at authorcsloanlewis.com for my blog, and c.sloanlewis on Instagram. You can follow Emily on YouTube at the channel name Did You Make That? Emily, should we do an outro?
No, not today.